Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you for that warm introduction of Mark. It kind of reminds me that, yes, in fact, I am a grizzled veteran at this point. You know, if you're asking me, the last thing we want to be doing, though, is building a lot of new development in those high wildfire areas, so, right, or areas prone to flooding, which we're going to be talking about a lot, but it shows the fundamental disconnect we're talking about. On one hand, we know in our local communities and statewide, we have to create new opportunities toward housing, and it should be affordable. On the other hand, we're confronting state mandates that, yes, they are mandating development, but seem to be working at cross purposes, and in fact, aren't even really assisting locals in getting the job done. It's not creating affordability to any appreciable degree. It's not creating housing in a sustainable way. So that's kind of the big issue we're seeing. We are literally witnessing, and I don't need to tell you guys this, a fundamental shift in the dynamics between state mandates and local governance, leading to policies that, while aim to address housing stock, often fall short. They leave cities hamstrung and set up failure rather than opportunities for success. And let's again call it out for what it is not doing, and that is fundamentally doing anything to address the actual affordability crisis that we know we have. A little bit deeper, and I want to hear what's on your mind too. I just got an earful this morning on, and I didn't even know about it, this 9-story proposal they're talking about on Bridgeway in Sausalito under SB 35. And lest I forgot what area we were talking about, I was speaking nearby, so walked over to Bridgeway. It's on 1 and 2 story. Yeah. With the tableau we're all familiar with the bay and tourists and restaurants. Who in their right mind would think that a 9-story building would make sense there, right? But that's what we're dealing with. And there's back. So bottom line is a lot of this is pointing toward a one-size-fits-all approach that's being mandated at the state level, and the RENA numbers are way too high. They don't make sense for our communities. But we're in a situation where local circumstances and needs and opportunities, frankly, are not being adequately dealt with. So what you should hold me to, and I will try to hold myself to, is not forgetting those roots. Really, that we are up there to represent the best interests of our communities and not falling to this pattern of groupthink, particularly around housing issues. So rather than empowering municipalities to tailor solutions that fit the unique needs of their communities, state mandates impose one-size-fits-all approaches that fail to account for regional disparities and nuances. This not only undermines the principles of local control, but also breeds resentment among residents who feel alienated from the decision-making process. Many of us are familiar with 825 Drake in Marin City, right? Yeah. Almost a textbook example of what we're talking about with that. But yeah, count on me to continue to be that voice. Would love to hear your thoughts, and I have not caught up in a while even on like RENA reform, what's going on with, is there like a state measure? Fill me in, but also any questions I can answer.
I can help you with that.
Yeah, so Amy, let's hear it.
Well, for one thing, the RENA mandates are impossible to meet even if you fulfill every category. If the developments are holding 10% or 20% of affordability, it increases the number of units you would have to provide exponentially. And my thought about. San Rafael is they have 3,220 units that they would have to build. But to actually do that at the 13% that they're offering right now, affordability, it would actually go to over 18,700 just to hit that bare minimum, and then you have to add all of the. You basically end up with about 22,000 units. So what you're talking about with the parking and all that other stuff, it's living here is terrifying. Our family lost our insurance last week. We are considered to be doing everything we can do. And in fact, I was offered a letter from the fire department, and when I went to AAA, they basically said, "What are you even doing in our office?"
Wow.
And it was very eye-opening.
So you're going to get stuck on the fair plan or just some...
We're going to do something.
Yeah.
But the thing about RENA is that what's going to happen at the mid-cycle when nobody has actually done enough is that we go back into SB 35, we go back into having our housing elements decertified, and 423 is there, and by rights for all of the areas that have already been put on the housing element, and you're already set up for failure right there. So the rest of all the development that can happen is decided by developers. It's not decided by the community, and it's not decided by planners, which is really terrifying. So that's one of my main thoughts, is that this is just it's a train headed for disaster. And just changing it a little bit, or changing the RENA numbers, doesn't change anything enough to make it worthwhile. This area here, as you know, has 14,000 homes up in this, Homestead Valley area.
Right.
And 16,000 people, 14,000 people, 16,000 people live down in Lower Mill Valley. They're supposed to put in 850 units down there. That's actually going to be more like 2,200 if they have to, do it at 10% or whatever. There's no way that any of us could survive that. If we have a summer day, that traffic is solid on Highway 1 all the way out.
I think we should admit that the affordable stuff, as you said, all requires subsidy.
Yes.
The government of the state of California is in deficit.
Yeah.
And we are running at the federal level $1 trillion of red ink every 100 days. We're headed to national bankruptcy. There's no place for subsidies to come from without risking the entire national economy. And for those of us who are living on fixed incomes, this is a disaster because our bonds and our investments are going to go in the toilet. You're creating a prescription for national poverty. That's what's happening here. And California seems to be leading the charge to destroy the nation economy. The other thing about PG&E, I hope people in this room know that natural gas prices are at the rock bottom. There is no possible justification for PG&E to pass along these costs to us. We are exporting more natural gas to the rest of the world right now than even Qatar, which was the previous we have created through our fracking industry, and in the liquid fuels that are coming out of our 6 million barrels a day of additional petroleum liquid fuels, as much as almost any OPEC country we have added in the last decade. These energy prices are absolutely a ripoff, and PG&E needs to be brought on the culprit. They need to be held to account as to what's happening to us here. We're paying, I have friends in Idaho where it goes down to 10, 20 degrees below zero. Their cost of a 4,000 square foot house to heat in the winter is less than a third of what my 2,000 square foot house costs in here in this temperate climate.
I can concur with that.
It's time to put an end to
Yeah.
this.
And it goes below zero, and their utility bills are a third of ours.
And I'm on the Utilities and
Why?
Energy Committee, so we have responsibility for oversight of rates. So really appreciate that. Yes.
I live up on Panoramic, been there about 32 years. I'm deeply concerned that all this construction and bringing in new people isn't supported by the water supply that we have. We've just had 2 droughts, and it got pretty dicey at the end of the last one. And so I want to know how they can justify these numbers based on that we have very limited water supply. And then the other thing is, why isn't there a class action right now being considered against PG&E? Because they're basically taking and destroying the future for our children and our grandchildren by their actions, and I think it's very direct. And some of the younger people in the upper Midwest have sued based on a failure to have a hopeful future, and I think we could certainly find that here.
Why don't we work our way over? Yeah.
So I'd like to go back to the topic of housing and also to say thank you for coming and being here today to hear of all the concerns. One of the things about housing and RENA in particular is that there's 2 components to it. There's the RENA methodology, and the state audit department found that the methodology that RENA is using is flawed and unsound. So that was based on an emergency audit request, and if you can be talking with your colleagues about the importance of having a full-blown audit of HCD, the Housing and Community Development Agency, that they do a full audit, because we know since that audit came out, California population has been stable at best, and is predicted to stay stable through 2060. That's from the Department of Finance, a much more reliable agency for many of us than what the Department of Housing and Community Development is. So Wiener and his colleagues, who are so often going, it's a crisis, and they have the nerve to add in that it's an affordable housing crisis, even though they're doing nothing about the affordability, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So we would benefit greatly from another audit looking at the methodology that they've been using, the faulty numbers, the projected needs being odd, the failure to have vacancy rates appropriately considered. So,
I'm Eileen Burke, I'm the mayor of San Antonio.
There this year, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I want to know where you see things in 5 years or so. Is it an initiative, a pushback like Prop 13 was, or?
So repeat the question. So
Yes, I think on the RENA numbers
Yes.
and the imposed housing and the taking away of local control, you may be a voice in the wilderness up in Sacramento, but what do you think the long-term strategy is? Is it initiative process, throughout the state? Are you working with a similarly minded assemblyman on this issue, and where do you think it's going?
There are some similarly minded, but I will say that the huge trend still is toward the direction of the state-imposed mandates in ever-increasing numbers. So that's at least, okay.
coming from that.
Okay.
But in terms of your question, 5 years will be too late. As Amy was pointing out, 4th year of this 8-year cycle of the housing element, if cities haven't met their numbers by the 4-year period, is when all of these other, the 35, especially 423, will start kicking in. So for anybody who must keep fighting at the local level about the local projects that are coming up, and people, like you were saying in Sausalito, are going, what? Who's ever dreaming that this would be right for a tourist community that depends on the beauty of that area? But if we keep fighting those projects just one by one by one, nobody's going to win on those. The policy is so big and so dangerous. And what's happening in Sacramento under Scott Wiener's leadership is crushing the American dream. There is no requirement for the public to be notified or informed or engaged, so it's crushing democracy.
Yeah.
And we're turning into a nation that if somebody out there has their dream, we will be a landlord-tenant model for everybody. That's what those high-rises mean.
People have to keep speaking out. People have to keep speaking out. There are some messages resonating right now. You're seeing a lot of action, for example, pushing back on hedge fund ownership of housing, which I think also goes to the point you're making. the corporatization, commodification of housing, which in my view is a step in the wrong direction.
What
So
kind of pushback are you seeing? Because
there's some legislation to ban that right now, or limit it in California. So I don't have the specific bill number, but we can get that if folks are
yeah, I'd be
interested.
interested.
Yeah.
Careful how that gets done, because they've got the best lawyers around, and all they do is partner with supposed nonprofits like $1.7 billion Mid-Penn Housing
Yeah.
that bought
Right.
the largest apartment complex in Fairfax, 80 unit Sherwood Oaks,
Yeah.
and is now charging 29% more rent for 2-bedroom
Yeah.
units
no,
there.
agreed.
So it's not just corporate entities, it's also nonprofits that are actually driving and being utilized and participatory profiteers off of this housing legislation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm aware of Mid-Penn. They're fighting me. I'm trying to ban pesticides along state highways and communities that have banned pesticides to bring Caltrans into line with that. Mid-Penn's opposing me.
It seems to me that we're sort of dancing around the main issue of what do the people living in a community really want developed there versus what does the real estate industry developers want. That's the two things. And until we remove the gun pointed at our head, the builder's remedy, until we remove that from the equation, any project that any community has approved is being done under duress. They're trying to meet ridiculous things that they didn't want in the first place, and they have this gun of the builder's remedy pointed at their head, so they're approving things they already don't want. I think we need to address that. The builder's remedy has to be removed before you can have a real conversation about what a community wants legitimately. And everything else is sort of just a lie and just covered in a facade of affordability and all the other things that are reasonable. You want a diverse community, but until we address the underlying truth, we're never going to get there. We're just going to dance around.
Yeah, let me look into that more. I mean, obviously I've become familiar with the builder's remedy, but like what the history even is on that. Yeah, good point.
They could do it better than me.
Yeah. Yes.
Two things. First, on the coastal housing bill of Wieners, there really needs to be some looking into the fact that many of these units become second units that people buy and own. They're second homes on the coast. And in fact, Carol Hart, the Coastal Commission head, said that with one building unit that was approved in Santa Cruz. She said, I'm concerned that many of these will be second homes for people who are going to buy these. And it was supposed to be an affordable situation. And I think that's part of, apart from lining the developer's pockets for Wiener, it's part of that whole thing of, it's not for people who really need the housing, it's for second homes. The other thing is on PG&E, when we're PG&E bashing, is I still have a regular meter, I do not have a smart meter, and every month they estimate and they tell me how much it's gonna be. Well, they estimated 3 or 4 months in advance, and I had this huge bill. I called them and they say, oh, we were just out to read the meter. Well, I challenged them and I had the guy come out, he read the meter, it was way below what it was. I mean, I owe about maybe $30. It's incredible what they're doing, and people who don't have the time and desire to call PG&E and argue with their people on the phone may be getting taken, or if it's an automatic withdrawal, they don't know that PG&E is taking this money, because what they do is they charge you and then they come back and they say, well, we're going to subtract this and this and this. So get out your
far regarding these RENA and the housing allocations is that in a place like Mill Valley, almost 2/3 of the units that were identified on the inventory are from underutilized commercial properties.
Sure.
So it's like you're cannibalizing local businesses to make way for housing units. And so, you know, there would be jobs lost, I assume.
Well,
business-
only if it's underutilized. So I don't think anyone's looking to
Well,
replace.
It's
I don't
full
know,
of
like
housing elements full of them.
Goodman's Hardware, Sloat Nursery. I mean, there's a long list of businesses that I use that are like, oh
Part
yeah.
of it's a game where they're just identifying, which is shows the ridiculousness where they're identifying sites that are
Well,
never gonna happen.
So that's what they
But,
had to do
yeah.
to come up with the
I
numbers.
mean,
But it seems to me that if the cities or, you know, everyone involved with the RENA process, if they're doing such an elaborate accounting of where we can get units, how many units, affordability of those units, why not factor in how many jobs and businesses would be lost in the given area to make way for all the new housing? And many of those would be lower income jobs, I believe, as well.
well, the goal would not to
Do that.
be not to do that. So it would be more like, so Northgate's a prime example where a lot of jobs have been lost. The face of retail is changing. So,
I can tell you though that the housing elements are examined and there's a list of whether or not the businesses have agreed. The owners of the property have agreed to do this, and if it's found that you don't have an agreed upon plan with an owner, that they are not considering it, then your housing element can be decertified. And I can tell you all, I don't like to publicize this at all, but we have several businesses that I've contacted on that list. They have no intention of doing this. All the Sloats do, by the way. But it would cut out so much of the numbers that we would totally lose certification. So the other thing that
okay, well, this isn't something I'm really dialed into, so.
I'll have a meeting with you someday.
Okay.
But that's what she said originally, is that this is a game they're playing, meant to fail, so that in 4 years from now, the builder's remedy takes place and we lose our sovereignty.
Right.
And that's exactly what Amy has just referred to. And that's why it's so disingenuous. It's set up to fail.
Yeah.
And we're all living in this knowledge of its coming failure, and we want to have our...
Yeah, the numbers aren't tenable, yeah.
Well, let's have you take it upon yourself to make an issue of the intentionality of its failure. You have a very safe district. You are so safe that you can stand up to the builders.
Yeah.
You can do that. And you can make yourself something of a memorable character in California's history if you can break their hold on our legislature.
Go back to
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a different perspective. My background is finance and international, global catastrophes. I started at Fireman's Fund, and I bought my house across the street for under $200,000. When I was young, it was affordable, but the same house now is not affordable. So when we talk about affordable housing, it's a push to create a worse quality of life for people than we had before. So my house, the value tripled in 5 years, and there was not a change in demand. What happened was the tech bubble crashed, and investors moved their money to real estate. And also in 9/11, people moved their money, into gold and to tangible assets. So I saw that happening, and I think most people saw the housing bubble grow at that point. It occurred at that point, and then the crash, we saw the big short. That was caused at Wall Street and mortgage-backed securities.
Yeah.
So I've been going around saying, well, how can I get the rest of my little loan or my addition? How can I get a bank loan that doesn't go to Wall Street, that doesn't go into a portfolio that is deteriorating our quality of life here? And also, I've driven across the country and I visited little towns where there's these huge, beautiful mansions that cost nothing, and they're just waiting to be renovated. But the investors are putting money here into housing instead of industry and jobs where people could have more of a share, and they would love their homes. like I loved Richmond, Illinois, where Louis Armstrong played, and Charleston, West Virginia has whitewater rafting and mountain climbing. So there's all these great towns that are dilapidated. So instead of it being California against the developers, can we have more of a national plan for housing when we have all this material shortages, labor shortages? How can we give people an affordable quality of life and get our banks back, our relationships with our banks?
Yeah.
I would love to be a part of that,
Yeah.
making it more of a national effort.
Right.
And traffic, like here in Marin, at least in Tam Valley, for example, a day like today, you've got half the state going out to Stinson Beach and the headlands. And I myself was running out in the mountain just this morning, but I live here. But anyway, I just think that that's a unique twist on Marin's situation, because we are kind of the recreational or the playground of everyone. And that's just not factored into any of this housing.
This state needs to get serious about the affordability of housing, and these policies that they're doing right now are not even gonna touch it. And we've got two elements here, what she was talking about, which is California prices are high, and I would like to talk to you some more. But also, what is making the cost of construction in California so much higher than everywhere else? And I'm a professional in the building industry, I can tell you. And nobody's talking about this. And this is a serious issue because the prices are not going to go down. The affordability is not going to go down as a result of these policies that are going out there. And people cannot afford to build things. They can't afford to repair their older houses. They can't afford to build a new house. And all of these policies are favoring what I call Mr. Big, or collectively BlackRock. But the policies are all favoring the big developer. And in my town with the SB 35, which is Sebastopol, that project is being constructed out of Idaho. So nobody's being hired locally to build that thing. They're getting away with, we couldn't get away with what they're getting away with, but the codes and the restrictions and everything in California are absolutely insane. It's so ridiculous that you're talking $800 now, $1,000 a square foot to build, and so when you're talking about affordable, you're requiring that all of that be subsidized by the state. This is not tenable, and nobody's talking about it. Why is nobody talking about it? I could talk about it for an hour, and I could point out to you, if you'd like to hear, there's this, and the state is making it more and more and more. They're just piling this stuff on.